Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. This is part one of our special two-part series on the 2019 Colorado legislative session. My guests include the Speaker of the House, Casey Becker. Casey, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And the Senate Minority Leader, Chris Harber. Chris, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Senator Rhonda Fields, always a delight to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And Senator Lois Court. Lois, great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
And my neighbor, State Representative Lori Sain. I'm almost in your district.
Yes. Well, you can adopt me.
All right, I will. So we have the exact proportion out of 100 legislators, 60 are Democrats, 40 are Republicans. That's a 3-to-2 ratio, and that's exactly what we have here today. So I'm going to start off, Casey, since you're Speaker of the House, what surprised you the most about the 2019 session? And give me something juicy.
Well, there were definitely juicy things that happened during the session. I think we were all caught off guard when the Republicans sued over having bills read at length. So having a bill read at length is a normal part of the process. It is protected and mentioned in the Constitution. But the way that it was used, how often it was used, and then that there was a lawsuit about it was a surprise.
Okay, and one of the references you're making is at one point, due to a lack of time when the Republicans in the Senate, and I'm going to let Chris talk about this too, demanded a bill be read. The Senate president had it read, but at different parts at the same time. And a judge said, no, you can't do that. Is that a fair assessment of what happened?
Sure. So what's been happening for a while, at least before I was in the legislature, was that when a bill is requested to be read at length, either people read it at the same time, or a machine reads it at a quickened speech, at a quickened pace. And I think that's, it's a pro forma thing, but for now a court has said, no, it has to be read in a slow and deliberate way, which, we had a bill this year that read at length would have taken 7 days to read, and you can't do other business during that time. So it really stalls the entire work of the General Assembly.
Maybe we need shorter bills.
Yeah, sometimes you can't always control it, because that one that I mentioned was 2,000 pages. There was nothing substantive in it. It was really just moving one big section of statute to a new section of the code. So, but you have to do that through a bill because it's getting new citations and code numbers. So it just had to be introduced, but it certainly became a tool to be used to slow down the entire process. And that happens sometimes. I think the lawsuit part of it, when the Republicans sued the Senate president, was definitely a surprise.
All right, so Chris, you obstructionist, tell me, respond to that, but also tell me what surprised you about this session.
Sure. The state constitution is very clear. Article 5, section 22 says that every bill that's introduced must be read at length on 2 different occasions. For us, that means on second and third reading. It's very clear, it's not optional, and it's not a legislative rule that can be waived. And the bills must be read at length on 2 occasions in each chamber unless there's unanimous consent from all members to dispense with that. So if even one member says, no, I don't consent, the Constitution requires that. As far as obstructionist, at times, yes. But I point to, for instance, House Bill 1032, the sex ed bill. That was in the Senate for 73 days, and the members of my caucus got to debate that on the floor the last 2 of those 73 days. The surprise for us was the number of bills actually decreased from 2018 to 2019, but our nonpartisan staff through the second half of the session were diligent in reminding leadership that we were actually further behind than we were the year before. So I think it left too many big bills at the end, and frankly, the majority in both parties, or both chambers, I think we're left having to prioritize that some things would pass and other things simply there wasn't time to do that.
So Rhonda, tell me, what surprised you the most in the Senate?
What surprised me the most was the level of civic engagement. The community really showed up to address their concerns about the bills that were being considered down here. They showed up for the red flag bill. They showed up for the vaccination bill. They showed up for
oil and gas.
And it's important that you lend voice to what we're doing down here. So what surprised me the most is that people were really engaged in the policy that we were being considered, which meant that we stayed down here for long hours because we want to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to lend voice and testify on the bill.
Lois, how about you? What surprised you the most?
It surprised and pleased me that we were able to do as much bipartisan work as we were with the serious difference in majorities. And of course, in the Senate, the majority wasn't as huge as in the House. And we were still able, those of us in the Senate, from both parties, to work across the aisle. And that seems like it would be a surprise to many people, but it was just a pleasure as far as I'm concerned.
So I think most Colorado citizens aren't aware, the vast majority of bills passed by the General Assembly are passed in a bipartisan manner.
Yep.
Does anyone have a rough percentage of how many bills, the percentage of bills that were passed with support from both Republicans and Democrats? Casey?
This year, 95% of the bills that we passed were bipartisan, meaning there were both Republicans and Democrats who voted for the bill.
Yeah, that's pretty extraordinary.
And many of them also had bipartisan sponsorship. So it was very, again, it's not so much a surprise to those of us who are here, but it may be a surprise to the public because all they hear is that we all hate each other, which we do not.
Right. Well, those of us in the media like it when you fight. So that's, if it bleeds, it leads. Okay, Lori, your quick assessment. What surprised you the most?
That I got the only Republican-sponsored bill passed in the entire legislature, and it was on banning online images of the suicide of a minor. It's a very sad bill, but hopefully it's going to prevent some of the suicide contagion we have going on in some of these schools.
So what do the bills actually specifically do?
Well, the bill, what it specifically does is to ensure that no one can take a picture or a film during which a minor is committing suicide, especially in order to coerce others into committing the same act.
All right, well, I'm glad that passed, to put it mildly. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back with our august panel in just a moment, so stay tuned.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
The Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is part one of our special two-part series on the 2019 legislative session. So, Lori, I'd be interested in your take on the role that Governor Jared Polis played in the legislative session. I'm going to ask each of you, just give me a quick assessment of how you thought he did and how it compares to prior governors, because all of you have been in office prior to Jared Polis being governor.
And I'll be honest, I think I saw him as much as Governor Hickenlooper, so I don't have an assessment one way or the other.
All right, Lois.
I think that he's still understanding how we work, because that's natural. It's his first term. And I think that his legislative liaisons really worked very hard to talk with us and communicate with us. I will say that there were times when some of us felt that he got kind of ahead of us, but we all caught up with each other.
All right, well, Jared's ahead of most of us anyway, so Rhonda, your take.
I saw him take an active role in what we were doing. So I saw him being somewhat, in my view, hands-on in shaping what he wanted to see us accomplish in this session. So I appreciated his visionary leadership.
All right, Chris.
I think Governor Hickenlooper demonstrated during his 8 years that with a split legislature, 6 of those 8 years, that he and his staff had to find ways to work together. And I think for Governor Polis that this session probably was a bit of a learning curve, coming from a legislator role in Congress to the chief executive role. I think maybe the one place where they went too fast, pushed too hard, was in the proposed vaping and tobacco tax that failed in the Senate. With all due respect to Senator Fields, I think she was the sponsor of that, but maybe a little bit more discussion with members of his party in both chambers before that got pushed out at the end of the session, because it failed.
And that was kind of a end of the session effort. Is that fair, Rhonda, to say?
Yeah, I think we were dealing with it the last 2 days of session, which is a huge policy to consider in the Senate. It had already passed and moved through the House. But I don't think the Senate had an opportunity to be reflective in reference to how we can navigate and make that work when we had so much other work that still needed to be done.
You going to bring that back?
Time will tell.
Oh, that's a yes. Casey, your take on the governor.
Governor Polis was really engaged on a lot of different policies, very into the details, very active. So Governor Hickenlooper took more of a backseat on a lot of legislation, but that was not Governor Polis.
All right, so one of the big, I think, accomplishments was of the General Assembly were a number of bills related to mental health, which it seems to be a bipartisan concern. Yeah. So Rhonda, I know you were involved with some of that legislation. There were several bills that passed. Tell me about the ones you were involved with, and also if you can comment on the Senate bills related to mental competency in the courts, as well as facilities, because the lack of facilities for people in the state to get treatment seems to be just an enormous problem. So give me your take.
When I think about some of the victories that we were able to achieve during this session, behavioral health was one of them, mental health was one of them. And one of the things that we were able to do was really address behavioral health as it relates to our youth, to try to address youth suicide. So there was Senate Bill 10, which increased access to behavioral health in our schools. We were able to expand opportunities for social workers, and we were able to address the whole issues as it relates to just making sure that the mind matters and what we need to be doing to helping our kids adjust to what it's like to be a young person. So I think that's significant when you think about the number of dollars that we invested, not only in behavioral health, but issues relating with opioids and addiction. Huge opportunities that we're able to increase access to services.
Did that include dollars? Because one of the things that amazes me is you have school psychologists in various districts that are responsible for like 1,000 or 2,000 kids. I mean, they obviously can't give significant care when they have that many kids that they're trying to help.
Yes, all the bills that I know that I've seen pass through our chamber was associated with dollars or some grants funding program. So nothing that I'm aware of was passed without being tied to some kind of financial support to make sure the resources would be available for our students and for our adults.
All right, anyone else want to comment? Lois, please.
Another factor that I think is extremely important is I don't know that Coloradans are aware that our prisons have become our mental health facilities. And so we did some work as well to try to address mental health for inmates, because it's a crucial piece of rehabilitation, and our prisons should not be mental health hospitals.
So Lori, I mean, we spend, I think one of the things the public doesn't know or isn't that aware of is we spend an extraordinary amount of money on our prison system. Yet the recidivism rate seems to be pretty high. And I'd be interested in comments from any of you. Do you have any sense of what the state could do to address the fact that we have so many people in jails, in prisons, and so many of them come back. We don't seem to have much of a success rate. Is that anything you've looked at, or I'd just be interested in any comment from anybody here?
I'll talk about it.
Okay, Casey, please.
So, felony filings in Colorado are up, and we are seeing increased convictions. So we have been actively addressing criminal justice reform, making sure that people with low-level offenses are not jailed. If they can't post bond for low-level offenses, they don't have to stay in prison. We've been looking at sentencing reform and, as Lois mentioned, providing mental health support in prison. So we, no one's a productive member of society if they're in prison. So we've been, low-level offenses trying to decriminalize and not keep people in jail when they don't have to be. So if we can get them out of jail into community-based centers, that's what we're trying to do. It reduces cost to the state, but it also puts people back into society. And then, we want to make sure that there are resources there to help people transition back into society.
Chris, please.
Aaron, you mentioned one aspect of mental health care, and that's through our school districts. And there's so many people who've moved to Colorado from other states. And they come to Colorado, and maybe they've come here from a state where education, K through 12 policy is made at a more central level, either the governor or the legislature. Since 1876, Colorado has been a local control state, and our Constitution gives authority over curriculum, and the courts have held, therefore, budget to local school boards, local school districts. So I think when we look at if there's a school psychologist, that's really more up to the school board. And for people who come from a state where maybe those decisions are made by the governor or a state board of education appointed by the governor or the legislature, this seems very alien. Since 1876, Colorado has upheld that local control aspect. So when we do things like full-day kindergarten or providing funding for school counselors or school psychologists, that doesn't mean the school districts have to do it that way. Full-day kindergarten was available. If they wanted to offer it, they could, and then they could have the money. If not, they didn't have to. And I think that's something that I encourage people of Colorado to understand. It's not because we don't want to do some of those things, it's because our Constitution assigns that authority at a different level of government than maybe existed wherever you moved here from.
All right, I know we have to go to a break in a minute, but I'd be interested on your take about full-day kindergarten, because that was a bill that passed. Lori, was that something you supported, or am I assuming you voted against that?
I did vote against that, and my districts would rather have that money go towards the budget stabilization factor and give them that option. Because some of these schools, they have a 4-day day in some of these rural areas, and they had preferred to spend that money on other things.
I think a lot of people don't realize there are a significant number of school districts, mainly small districts, that as a cost-saving measure have gone to 4-day school weeks, which really can have an impact on families, working, especially, parents who have to work. I don't think we've seen any of the big districts do that yet, but do you think that's something that's going to, or am I wrong? Tell me if I'm wrong.
One of the Adams County school districts is on a 4-day week. So, but some schools do it as a way to entice teachers. In rural areas, it can be hard to get people out there. I have some of my school districts in rural areas have a 4-day week. It's as much about perks for employees as it is about budget savings.
Well, I one time was a substitute teacher just for a day or two at a time, and I don't know how anybody does that as a career. You could pay me $1 million and I would probably be running screaming after a week or two.
And so would the kids, huh?
Yeah, to put it mildly. Any other comment before we take a break on full-day kindergarten?
Yeah, I was one of the prime sponsor of the full-day kindergarten in the Senate, and I can tell you I can't be more proud of the legislation, because basically what it does, it will ban public schools from having to charge parents for full-day kindergarten. So now parents have an option to allow their child to participate in full-day kindergarten if you choose, because 4 hours is just not enough time. And our kids need to be set up for success, and 8 hours gives them enough to kind of practice their letters, their alphabets, learning a little math, and parents don't have to decide between, can I afford that additional coverage, or can I even navigate a 4-day when I work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. The state has taken that out of the mix in reference to families having to make that decision. The state will now fund full-day kindergarten for every child in the state of Colorado if that parent chooses to.
All right. On that note, we're going to take our last break in part one. We'll be right back to wrap up.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Safely stop fires around your home. Introducing the Fire Ice XT 20-ounce aerosol canister. Fire Ice XT is an eco-friendly water-based fire suppressant gel. Unlike a traditional fire extinguisher, Fire Ice XT is a highly effective, non-toxic firefighting agent that is easy and safe to use around your home, family, and pets. Available at Amazon.com or call 800-924-4874.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and Keep Hope Alive.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scenes photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is part one, our final segment in part one of our two-part series on the 2019 legislative session. One of the most controversial bills, of course, was the red flag bill for emergency protective orders. Lois, that was your bill?
Yep.
Talk a little bit about
Proudly so. The Extreme Risk Protection Order will give the police and people close to an individual in crisis the opportunity to have a judge determine whether or not temporarily removing firearms from that person's possession will help them be safer and help our community be safer. I am absolutely positive it is constitutional and it will save lives. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the advocacy of so many people all over Colorado who supported that bill. We heard from people in every corner of the state who absolutely wanted to see that bill pass and came and testified to that effect.
How many other states have a red flag bill? Do you know? I had heard 17, but I don't know if that's accurate.
I think it's about that. Because some are still working on it, so I'm not positive at this point.
Lori, what was your take on the bill? My guess is you did not enthusiastically support this bill. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I believe it's unconstitutional and reminds me of that movie Minority Report, except without the psychics. They're basically charging you for something you could do in the future. And it also, and I've heard from a lot of women on this bill who are very concerned because it makes their ex-husband or ex-boyfriend a mental health professional, able to judge their mental capacity so they could be disarmed.
Chris, give me your take on the bill. Something tells me you were not a big supporter, or am I wrong?
Oh, you are correct. I was a no vote. Just because we use the label red flag bill does not mean that other states have a bill similar to what we have. And unfortunately in Colorado, this is not about a family member or someone who is close to you. It could literally be anyone who's willing to accuse you over the phone, never having to show up in court, of being a threat. And if the court sides with that concern and issues a warrant, due process goes out the window. There's no suspicion that a crime has been committed or that there's materials at your property involved in a crime committed somewhere else. Law enforcement comes to your home, searches your home, and removes your property, which I view as an absolute disregard for the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that defends,
You're talking about illegal search and seizure.
Yes, and a warrant being issued upon due process, suspicion, reasonable person having some reasonable belief that a crime has been committed. But this isn't about a crime having been committed. This now in Colorado is about pre-crime. It is I believe, unconstitutional. I hope the courts will strike it down.
Isn't there a further concern of those who oppose the bill that in the past General Assembly, the proposed legislation allowed for the return of someone's weapons after a certain period of time, and the burden was on, whether it be the authorities or anyone else, saying no, that return should not happen. Has the burden now been switched so that the owner of weapons has an obligation to prove that he or she should be entitled to get his or her weapons back, or am I wrong about that?
I believe you're right. I don't think you are wrong. I think you're right. And the problem, another problem that I have with this bill is it uses the lowest possible threshold to take away your property and a much higher level of threshold that you have to disprove negatives to get your property back. It's backward and again based on pre-crime, not a crime having been committed.
Yeah, well,
Rhonda, please.
I kind of disagree with your comments, but you realize that I would, because we disagree on this topic. We had really credible testimony from the sheriff in Douglas County, who was one of the...
Tony Spurlock.
Yes, who was the inspiration behind this bill, because he felt like if we had this measure in place when someone was going through a psychotic crisis and the family members knew it, it would have been an opportunity for us to address that issue.
Right, his deputy was killed.
That's
named for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zachary Parrish.
So I think there's an opportunity for us to address these issues, because when I think about a common thread as it relates to some of these shootings, sometimes it is associated with someone that's having a mental crisis issue. And a lot of times the person that's having it, the family members see that that's going on, or it could be someone in a school, it could be a neighbor or whatever. It's an opportunity for us to intervene on the interest of public safety and on the interest of maybe that person not committing homicide or suicide. So I think the bill is the right approach for Colorado.
Casey, I'm going to give you the last word if you want on this.
On red flags, it does exist in other states. It has been upheld. It is going to save lives. I think it's a good step to address a real issue in Colorado, which, as we've discussed a little bit, are issues around mental health. And if we can save lives and still honor the Constitution, then I think it's the right move.
Okay, I know I'm going over time. If someone is falsely accused, as it were, if someone says, Rhonda has weapons and is terribly depressed and has made threatening statements and your weapons are taken away from you, and none of that is true, do you have any recourse?
Yes, absolutely. And don't forget, this isn't just because someone says something. A judge has to look at this and decide whether or not that's appropriate. And as far as I'm concerned, there's a bottom line here. People are worth more than property. And to protect people, I think it is worth looking at whether or not certain kinds of property, firearms, ought to be removed from a dangerous situation.
All right. My guess, though, is judges are probably, I guess we'll see how it plays out. Yeah. My guess is judges are probably likely to err on the side of safety and say, I don't want to take a chance that this is a false accusation. Right. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. But I can see, how people have a lot of concerns about it. Okay, well, that's the end of the show. I know we've run over time, but we're coming back for part 2. So make sure you watch that as well. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.